Hello everybody and welcome to another YouTube video. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you 3 Python automation projects for beginners. Now these are simple Python projects that are meant to show you a real-world use case of Python. So even if you don't end up using these for automation, you will learn a lot and you'll learn specifically some standard libraries as well as how to interact with APIs and a few other things that you probably don't know as a beginner Python programmer. With that said, for all of these projects, I'm going to assume you have a basic understanding of Python. So maybe you know about for loops, you know about if statements, you know about variables, just the very basics. I'll explain everything in as much depth as possible. And hopefully after following along, you will have 3 completed automation projects. With that said, let me list out the projects and then we'll get into them. So the first project we're going to work on is a multi-clipboard. This is a program that's going to allow you to actually store multiple things on your clipboard at the same time. You'll see how that works when I demo it in a second. Then we are going to work on a weather API application. So this is going to allow you to get the weather of any city in the world, as well as the temperature and some other information like that. And then lastly, we are going to work on a program that allows you to send an email in Python. So 3 pretty useful things that you can learn how to do. Again, even if you don't use these projects, they will teach you a lot. With that said, let's go ahead and get into it after a quick word from our sponsor. Before we dive in, I need to thank Altium Designer for sponsoring this video. Altium Designer is the world's most trusted PCB design system that enables engineers to effortlessly connect with every facet of the electronics design process. Altium Designer has used 35 years of innovation and development to create a truly unified design environment that makes it the most used PCB design solution on the market. Altium Designer provides an intuitive and powerful interface that lets you design PCBs rapidly while interacting and collaborating with your mechanical designers. The interface provides a photorealistic 3D environment, collaboration and synchronization with tools including SolidWorks, PTC Creo, and Autodesk Inventor, realistic rigid flex designs, multi-board assembly, and much more. Altium Designer is the most popular ECAD tool and electronics design software, and you can get started with it today for free by pressing the link in the description and registering for a free trial. Thanks again to Altium Designer for sponsoring this video, and now let's dive in. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Now I just want to run you through my environment here so you understand the different tools that I'm using. Right now I have Visual Studio Code open. This is a free code editor that you can write Python code in. You do not need to use this. In fact, you can use anything that you'd like, so long as you understand how to use the tool and how to run your Python code. If you don't already have something to write Python code in, I would recommend VS Code. You also can just use the standard idle application that comes with Python when you install that by default. Great. Now I'm going to be using Python version 3.9 for this video. You can use any version of Python that is 3.6 or above. So just make sure it's 3.6 or above. You really should be using that version anyways, because the other ones are quite old at this point in time. All right. So with that said, let's get into this first application here, this first project, which is going to be the multi-clipboard. Now, the idea behind this application is to be able to store multiple things on your clipboard, right? So the clipboard is when you copy and paste stuff. Currently, you only have access to kind of one save slot. So you copy something, paste it, and then when you copy something else, it's going to override what you already have. Now, the idea here is to build an application that allows us to store multiple things from our clipboard and then easily load all of those things to our clipboard. So essentially, we have a multi-clipboard. Now, it's not going to be as seamless as, a bunch of keyboard shortcuts, but you'll see how it works here as I demo the project. So I actually am in a different folder, not the one that I have open in VS Code, where I have a working version of this application. And the way it works is you run Python multi-clipboard.py. This is the name of the file. And then you pass a command. Now, the command can be save, load, or list. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to type save, and it's going to ask me a key to save this data under. Now, the data is whatever's currently on my clipboard, so whatever I've copied previously. So what I'm going to do here is just say test, and now it's going to say data saved. Now, if I want to view all of the different pieces of data or all of the clipboard items that I have in this application, I'm going to pass the command list, and you're going to see that I have a key test associated with email message. That's what I had on my clipboard. You can see here if I paste, that's what it is, email message, right? So that's why it's saved there. I also have ETH, and that corresponds with an Ethereum address. Anyways, let's now use this to actually load a key. So what I'm going to do is pass load, and now it's going to ask me a key to load the data from. So I'm going to type in ETH, And when I do this, now my clipboard has that on it. So it's controlling your clipboard, and it's going to take what you have on the clipboard and save it, or change what's on your clipboard to be whatever the key is that you passed. Hopefully that makes sense. This is a pretty useful thing to do. And of course, I will demonstrate how we do that. So with that said, what we're going to want to do here is open up a new Python file. This is called multi-clipboard.py. You can call it whatever you'd want, and just open it in a folder or some place on your computer that you know the location of it, because we're going to have to actually run the Python code from the command line rather than hitting this nice run button. If we just hit the run button, it's not going to work as we expected, although I can show you kind of a workaround in case you don't know how to run it from the console. Okay, so we have multi-clipboard.py. Now, the first thing I want to do in here is just import a few modules and then talk to you about how we actually accept kind of keyword arguments or command line arguments from our Python script. So I'm going to import the module sys. I'm also going to import the module clipboard. Now, this is built into the Python standard library, which means you don't actually need to install any of these modules. They already exist. I'm also going to import something called JSON. Now, the idea here is I want to actually store all of these clipboard items in a file. So the file I'm going to use is a JSON file, and I'll talk to you about how a JSON file is kind of formatted in a minute. For now, though, let's have a look at how we use the clipboard module, because it's very straightforward. So what I can actually do is say data is equal to clipboard dot, and then let me just reference my cheat sheet here, and I'm going to go with paste. Now, what paste does is exactly what it sounds like. It's going to paste the data from your clipboard to this data variable. So let's just print out data. And notice that if I paste right now, this is the data that I have on my clipboard. And when I run my code here by hitting this run button, you'll see that it should just print out what's on my clipboard. So easy enough. That's how you actually get the data from a user's clipboard. You use clipboard.paste. Now, to actually save data to the user's clipboard, you do the following. Do clipboard like this, dot, and then I believe this is copy. And I'm just going to put something like ABC, okay? So I'm just going to say clipboard.copy ABC. I'm going to run this, and then I'm just going to paste, and notice now that I have ABC on my clipboard. So there you go. You've just learned how to use the clipboard module. Okay, so now that we've looked at that, what I want to do next is show you how we can run this Python script directly from a command line, so using the Python command rather than actually hitting a button. So this is something that might be a little bit difficult if you haven't done this before. I'm going to try to explain it in as many ways as possible, and if you know how to do this, maybe just fast forward a minute or two in the video, and you'll get to the point where we actually start writing the rest of the code. Anyways, the point is, I don't want to be able to hit this button. I want to actually run the code from my command line. Now, the command line is your terminal or your command prompt. If you're on Mac or Linux, it's going to be your terminal. If you're on Windows, it's going to be your command prompt. Now, if you're working in VS Code, this is really easy for you. All you have to do is kind of open up this bottom window here, which you can get from just dragging from the bottom. And you'll see that you should have either a terminal or a command prompt open, depending on your operating system. Now, this here, kind of to the left of this angled bracket, is the path that your terminal or command prompt is currently in. Now, you want this path to be the same location where your Python file is. So notice I have users, Tim tutorial. And then if I type the command dir, this is actually going to show me all of the stuff that's in this folder. And well, what's inside of here is multi-clipboard.py. If you're on Mac or Linux, you could type ls, and then that would show you all of the files as well. Anyways, the point of me showing you that is that I'm currently in the correct location where my Python file is, and that allows me to actually directly access this file and run the Python command with it. So I can say Python multi-clipboard.py and run the file. Now, I'm going to show you how to get here if you're not already here, you're not working in VS Code. So if that's the case, first you want to figure out where your file actually is, right? So you can do that by going to your Finder or going to your Windows Explorer. I know where mine is. Mine is in this PC. It's in C drive. It's in users, Tim, and then I have a folder here called tutorial. I got to find where this is. All right, so I've just opened the folder here. I just had to search for it for a little bit. Anyways, I have this tutorial folder, and you notice this is where my multi-clipboard Python file is. Now, again, if you are on Mac or Linux or Windows, whatever, just open up in Finder or open up in Windows Explorer this location, and then look for the path of this file. If you're on Windows, it's really easy. You should see it right in this search bar, and you can just copy it directly, so Control-C. If you're on Mac, you might need to right-click, click on something like Get Info, and then it should show you the path to this file, but you just want the location of it. Now, once you have that location, what you can do is open up your command prompt or open up your terminal, So just by going to maybe the Windows bar and typing command prompt, or if you're on Mac, you're going to go to the Spotlight search and type for terminal. Linux, you should be able to open the terminal. And what you want to do, I can actually just do this directly here, is type in the command cd. This stands for change directory. And then you want to paste in the path to where your Python file is. So in this case, this is my path. And what's cd again? Change directory. So I'm going to change into this directory. So cd into this right now. So now I'm inside of tutorial. And now that I'm here, I'm able to use the Python command to actually run my Python file, which I will now show you. So hopefully at this point in time, you've been able to get into the correct directory. There's not really much more that I can explain. You might have to look it up on a different video or kind of go to Stack Overflow or something. But at this point, we can actually run our Python file using the Python command. So I can type Python and then the name of my file. Notice I don't have to type the whole thing. I can just type in MUL and then hit tab. It completes the whole file name. And then when I do that, it will actually run the Python file. Now, if you're on Mac or Linux, you'll likely have to use the Python 3 command. So Python 3 multi-clipboard.py, and this should work. Now, notice I'm getting an error here because I'm on Windows, but try Python or Python 3, and then that will actually run your Python file. Okay, again, can't really explain that much more. You need to be able to open and run your Python file from the command line, either terminal or command prompt. Again, the way you do that is you change the directory into the directory where your Python file is. You can find the location of that by going to Finder or Windows Explorer, and then you type the command cd space and then whatever that full location is, and it should bring you to that directory where you can then run the Python file. Now, the whole reason why we need to do that is because we're passing command line arguments to our Python file when we run it, and I'm going to show you how we do that now. So the way that we actually can pass command line arguments to our Python file is we do something like Python multi-clipboard.py, and then like you saw me do, we pass, for example, the command test or the command save. Now, how do I actually access those in Python? Well, that's why we have the sys module imported. So what I'm going to do here is just print out sys dot, and then this is going to be argv. Now, argv is going to give you all of the command line arguments that are passed alongside when you run this Python file. So anything that comes after multi-clipboard.py, actually, this will be passed as well. So I'm going to save this. Now I'm just going to type test hello world like this. And when I hit enter here, notice it's going to give me a list that's containing all of the stuff that I passed after the keyword Python. So this is how you access the different command line arguments. Hopefully that makes sense. But that's what we're going to use for this tool, so I needed to explain. Now, if I want to access, say, just test or just hello or just world, maybe all the ones that come after this name right here, there's a few ways to do that. The first thing I could do is take a slice. So I could say 1:, which means now I'm not going to include the first element right here, but I'll include the rest of them. So now if I run this, so let's just run the same command. Notice now I just get test and hello world. Awesome. So for our application, we only want to accept one command after the multi-clipboard.py or after the Python file name. So to do that, we are going to write an if statement that checks if the user has passed exactly one command. So I'm going to say if, and actually, yeah, I'm going to say if the len of sys.argv is equal to 2. Now, the reason I'm checking if it's 2 is because I'm going to have the name of my Python file and then the name of the command. So it needs to be exactly 2 command line arguments. If this is the case, then I want to get the second argument. So I'm going to say my command is equal to sys.argv at index 1, right? Because I'm accepting the second argument, which is going to be the first index in the list. Then I'm going to print out my command. Okay, so let's run this now. When I do this, notice now that my command is test. That's exactly what I want. Once I get the different commands, and I can start actually handling them. And just to clarify here, in case I didn't mention this, the multi-clipboard.py, again, that's the name of my Python file, what I have named right here. If you named your Python file something different, you're going to change multi-clipboard.py to whatever you named your Python file. If you named it test, you're going to do test. If you named it main, you're going to do main. Hopefully that is clear. Okay, so we have the command now, and what I want to do is I want to check if the command is equal to the 3 commands that we're going to allow, which is going to be save, load, and list. So I'm going to say if the command is equal to save, then we can do something. For now, we'll just print save, but we will actually save something. We're going to say elif the command is equal to load. Then what we want to do is we want to load something, and don't worry, I'll pause so you guys can copy all this down, and I'll say elif command is equal to list. Then I want to print list, and then otherwise I'm going to say print, and we'll just type unknown command. Okay. Nice. What am I doing wrong here? Awesome. Okay, so now I'm handling the different commands that we can type in. If you type one that we don't know, we're going to do unknown command. Now, the way that this is working, in case you're not familiar with the if statements, is we're checking if the command is equal to these different strings. I think that's pretty straightforward. Whatever's in the indented block is going to happen if the condition here, which is just checking for equality, is true. Now, the elif says that I'm only going to check this right here, so this condition, if this one was false. So if the command wasn't save, I'll check if it's load. If it wasn't load, I'll check if it's list. And if it wasn't save, load, or list, then I will print out unknown command. Nice. Now, one other thing I'd like to do is make it so that if you don't type in exactly 2 arguments, then you get an error message that says, please type in a command or something like that, right? So I'll say print, please pass exactly 1 command, okay? So now you get an error message if you don't type in exactly 2, which is really 1 command because 1 includes the Python file name. Okay, so now that we've done that, what I want to do is figure out how I'm actually going to store these commands. And as I mentioned, we're going to use a JSON file to do that. So I'm going to make a new file, and I'm going to call this clipboard.json. And I realized I said we were saving commands. No, we're not saving commands. We're going to be saving things that are on our clipboard. Now, a JSON file is very similar to a Python dictionary, and it allows us to store key value pairs. So inside of the JSON file, we can have something like key, and then have it associated with some value. Now, this is, again, very familiar or very similar to a Python dictionary, and we're going to use the JSON file to store all of the keys and all of the values, where each key is a clipboard item or a clipboard key, and each value is what was actually on the clipboard, right, that we were associated with that key. So hopefully that makes a bit of sense, but this is the basic kind of syntax for JSON. You have double quotation marks for your key name. You do a colon, and then you can store some different values. We're just going to be storing strings, but you could store numbers. You could store Booleans. Notice that there's no capital here. It's just going to be a lowercase for the true. You could store arrays or lists like this. You can store other JSON objects. JSON is really cool, and I actually have a video on JSON. It's either live now or going live soon. Anyways, you can check my channel and see if that's up right now. Okay, so this is our clipboard file. I'm actually going to delete this for now because we're going to create this from code, but I just wanted to show you kind of the JSON syntax and why we're going to use that to store our data. So now that we've looked at that, I want to write a function that's able to create a JSON file for us and one that's able to read a JSON file for us. So let's create one first. So I'm going to say define, and I'm going to say save, and let's just call items like that. Now, inside of save items, what I want to take in is a file path. Now, the file path is where I want to save this essentially. And then I want to take in some data, and the data is going to be, well, the data that I want to save to this file. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open a file. So I'm going to say with open. I'm going to put file path as the file that I want to open because we're going to pass that as a parameter to the function. And I'm then going to put this in R mode. Now, R stands for read. So I'm going to be, I want this to be W mode. Good job I said that because W stands for write. This means I'm going to override this file if it already exists, or I'm going to create a new one. So I'm going to say with open, file path W. I'm going to put as F. Essentially, that just means that F is going to store whatever I've opened right here. And then here, what I can do is use the JSON library to actually dump some data to a file, which you're going to see right now. So I'm going to say json.dump, and I'm going to dump the data to the file F. And that's as easy as it is to actually save data to a JSON file. So let's just look at what this is doing. We've defined a function. The name of the function is save items. If you're unfamiliar with functions, you call them by writing the name of the function and then passing the corresponding parameters. So these are 2 pieces of data that we need to pass. So I could pass something like test.json. And then since JSON is very similar to a Python dictionary, the data that I'm going to pass here is just going to be a Python dictionary. So I'm going to pass some key associated with some value, right? This is just a kind of a dummy function call, so you can see how this works. Anyways, that's what I'm passing. So I'm saying save items. The name of the file is test.json. Then we have our key and value in a Python dictionary. So that's our data. Then what I do is I say with open. I'm opening the file path, which is test.json in W mode, which means I'm going to create a new file or override an existing file if it's there. So just pretty much recreate it, but empty anything that's currently inside of it. I'm going to open this as the variable F. Then I'm going to say json.dump. What this will do is write the Python dictionary as a JSON object to this file. So I'm going to dump the data to the file F, and then it will create the file for us. So let's just run the code, and you'll see that this should work. So I'm just going to run it like that. It gives me unknown command. That's fine. But notice test.json was created and it wrote key and value inside of here. Hopefully that makes sense, but that is how you write JSON data. And now that we have this file, we're going to use it to actually load the keys and values, so the clipboard items that we've saved. So now that we created this, what I'm going to do is write another function that's going to read the JSON file for us. So I'm going to say define load JSON. I'm going to take in a file path. And what I want to do here is I want to open the file path. This time I'm going to open it in R mode, which stands for read. I'm going to open it as F, and I'm going to say that my data is equal to json.load, and I'm going to load F. Okay, so I'm just loading in this file. Now what's going to happen is it's going to read this file, and it's going to give me the Python dictionary representation of this JSON data. In case I didn't mention it, JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. It's just a specific file type that you can use in pretty much all types of applications. It's very standard, specifically when you're working with things like APIs, which we're actually going to see later. So then from here, I'm going to return my data. This is going to be a Python dictionary. I'm going to access that inside of here when I'm kind of loading and saving my different clipboard items, okay? All right, so now we know how to save items. We know how to load our JSON. So I'm actually just going to make this load items because that probably makes more sense. So now that we have our two functions here that are able to read and write the data, what I want to do is utilize them. So let's start by actually writing the save command. Now the save command needs to take whatever's currently on our clipboard and save it as a key in our dictionary, or I guess in this case, in our JSON file. Now for now, let me just delete this JSON file because we don't actually need this one. So the first thing I need to do when you want to save something is I need to prompt you to type in a key, and that key is what I'm going to use in the dictionary to be associated with your clipboard item. So I'm going to say key is equal to input. Input allows the user to actually type something in, right? So I'm going to say enter a key like that, okay? Now that we have the key, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that my data at key is equal to, and then this is going to be clipboard, and let's type it all out, dot paste, right? Because paste is how you get what's currently on the clipboard. Then after this, I'm going to say save underscore items. I'm going to pass a file path, which I'll define in a second, and then I'm going to pass my data, and my data is going to be the variable data. Now, some of you may have noticed I don't yet have the variable data defined. So what I need to do up here is say data is equal to, and then this is going to be load items, and I'm going to load the JSON file here. Now, I need to create a variable that stores the name of my JSON file. So I'm going to say saved underscore data like this is equal to, and then we'll call this file clipboard.json, okay? Clipboard.json like that. So let's put save data inside of here. And let's put saved data here. All right, so what I've done is just made a variable that's going to store the name of where I want to save my data, essentially. The first thing I'm going to do is load all of my items or load my data. So I actually could maybe rename this load data. That's probably going to make more sense. So let's rename these. Okay, data and data. So I'm going to attempt to load this file right here. That's now going to give me a Python dictionary that contains whatever the data is inside of there. So now if you type in save, we're going to ask you for a key. We're going to then store inside of this data dictionary the key associated with whatever the value is that's on your clipboard. Then we're going to call save data, and that's now going to rewrite this file and save all of that data persistently. Great. Okay, hopefully this is making a little bit of sense. Now, one thing that I do want to mention here is that when I try to load this data, we're actually going to get an error if the file that we're trying to load doesn't exist. Now, the file we're trying to load is clipboard.json. Right now, that file doesn't exist. So we have two options. We can create the file and we can just give it some kind of default value. So essentially put nothing inside of it, or we can kind of handle the error where this file doesn't exist, which is what I would prefer to do. So here I'm going to write a try. Now a try is something that you can use when you're not sure if a line of code or a section of code is going to execute or not without an error. So I'm going to say try. I'm going to try to do all of this. And then I'm going to write an except statement, and the except is essentially going to be entered if what I tried to do in here failed. So if an exception was raised, if an error happened when I was doing this, then we're going to go inside of the except block, and I'm just going to return an empty dictionary like this. So essentially, we're going to try to load this file. If this file doesn't exist, then I'm going to return an empty dictionary, and that's it. That's really all we need to do. Hopefully that makes sense, but that's what we're doing in that function. Okay, so now the save command should actually work. So before we go any further, let's try that out. So let me just get out all this here. So let's now run the command python This is going to be multi-clipboard.py, and let's try to save what's currently on our clipboard. Okay, so it's going to say enter a key. For now, let's just go with Python as our key. And if we go to clipboard.json now, we can see that we have Python and then nothing was on our clipboard, so it just had an empty string. There you go. The save is working. All right, now I just want to print something out here that says data saved, just so that we have a little bit of output for our user. Okay, so data saved, nice. Now let's do load. So if I want to load something, this is actually pretty straightforward. The first thing I need to do is ask the user for a key for the data that they want to load. I need to make sure that key exists in the dictionary. And if it does, I'll give them the data. If it doesn't, then I need to return an error message. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to say, let's actually just do the same thing here. Key equals enter a key. I'm going to say if the key is in data. Actually, I'm going to say if the key is not in data. No, you know what? No, we'll go if key in data. So if the key is in the dictionary, so we actually have a key that they typed in here, then what we will do is say clipboard dot, and then this is going to be copy, and we're going to copy data at key. Otherwise, we are going to print key does not exist. Okay, and then I'm going to print a message here and say print data copied to clipboard. Okay, well, let's add a period. So quickly recap here, we're asking them to enter a key. We're going to check if this key exists in the dictionary. This is a very simple way to do that. Say if key in data. If the key is in the data, then I'm going to say clipboard.copy data key. So I'm going to access what the value of that key is in the dictionary and copy it to their clipboard. I'll print out the data was copied to clipboard. Otherwise, I'll print key does not exist. Great. So now we can actually try to load this. So let's run this command with save. Let me copy something first. So let's copy this. Let's run this command with save. Let's go test. Okay, so our data was saved. Now let's run this with load. Let's type in Python. Okay, data copied to clipboard. When I paste, there's nothing there. Great. Now let's run this again. Let's type in test. And now when I paste, notice I have what I actually stored in the multi-clipboard. Okay, hopefully that is all good. Now the last thing that we need to do is the list command. The list command is very straightforward. All we're going to do is print out the dictionary, or we're going to print out the different keys in the dictionary. Up to you how you want to do this, but I am just going to print out data. Now, when I do that, it's just going to give me all of the keys and all of the values so I can see what's in my multi-clip. So let's run this now. And let's go with list. And when I do that, notice I get Python associated with nothing and test associated with clipboard.copy. Now, one feature you may want to add to this program here is the ability to delete a key. I'm going to leave that to you guys as kind of, say, homework if you want to do that. It's pretty straightforward, but I'm not going to implement it in this project because I don't really even see a huge value in deleting, because what happens is if you want to override a key that already exists, you just type the same key and it will override the key that's already on the clipboard, right? That's the way that we've implemented. So with that said, that's going to wrap up this first project. I apologize if this was a little bit slow for some of you, but I'm not sure the exact audience that's going to be watching this. So I just want to make sure it's accessible as possible to everyone, right? So kind of over-explaining rather than under-explaining. That's the motto that I usually go with. Anyways, that's how it works. To do a quick summary, we import our modules here. We have our saved data variable that has clipboard.json. That's just the name of the file we're going to use to store the multi-clipboard. We have our two functions here that are able to write the JSON file and read the JSON file. We're then going to make sure that we have exactly two command line arguments, one being the name of the Python file, the next being the command that we want to run. We're going to grab what that command is. We're going to load our data from the JSON file. We're going to say if the command is equal to save, then we want them to enter a key. We're going to get what's from their clipboard and save it in our dictionary. We're then going to save that persistently to the JSON file. If they type in load, same thing, we want a key. We're going to check if the key is in the dictionary. If it is, then we are going to take whatever the value is and put that on the user's clipboard. Otherwise, we'll tell them key doesn't exist. And if they type in list, then we're just going to print out what the data is. All of this code will be available from the link in the description. Now we're going to move on to project number 2. All right, so now we're moving on to project number 2. Now in this project, I'm going to show you how to work with an API. An API is an application programming interface. Now this is a resource on the web that's either going to give us some data or allow us to send a request to it and then modify some information. You've probably heard of APIs before. We're going to work with a very simple one here that's going to give us data about weather, right? So weather information for any city in the world. Pretty useful. And again, even if you don't really care about the weather aspect of this, I'd still follow along because it shows you how to work with APIs, and you can take this knowledge and apply it to pretty much any API. Say you wanted to get maybe the scores of a hockey game or something, same type of thing as what you're going to do here to get that information. Okay, so now that we've talked about that, I'm not going to demo the project because I think I explained it well enough. We're going to go to this website. I'll leave a link to it in the description because this is the API that's completely free that we're going to be using for this project. Now, you do need to create an account on this website. It's just going to require an email address, no credit card or anything like that. And when you create an account, it should give you an API key. Now, I'll show you how to get to the API key if you don't notice it. That's the main thing that we're going to be looking for. Once you have the API key, you pretty much can get off this website. So notice here that I've signed in with an account, and when you click on this in the top right, it says My Services, My API Keys. Just click on My API Keys here, and then it should show you your key. Now you can click on the copy button and grab the key, that's Edit API Key, but you should be able to just grab it like this and copy it, or generate a new one. Anyways, you want the key, so copy your key. And don't share this with anyone else. I'm going to delete the account before I post this video, so I don't really care. But we're going to go to our Python file. I've just made a new one called weather. And I'm going to type in API key is equal to, and then I'm going to paste the API key in like this. Once you have the API key, we don't really need to use this website anymore, although I will show you how we look at the different APIs and kind of interact with them. So if I go back to the API page here, notice we have current weather data. Now there's a bunch of other APIs that you can look at as well. So hourly forecast, one call API, whatever. I'm just going to do the current weather data. So I'm going to click on the API documentation, and it's going to show us here how we actually call this API. So you can read through this. Again, this link is in the description. You can find this page. I just wanted to show you this is the documentation, and this is essentially how I figured out how to do this. Okay, so now that we have the API key, what we actually need to do is install a module in Python, which allows us to send a request to this API. Now, this module, very fittingly, is called request, and I'm going to show you how to install it. So you need to open up a command prompt or a terminal, depending on your operating system. And in the command prompt, doesn't matter the location, you don't need to get in a specific directory. Just type in the following command, pip install, and then request like this. Now, when you do that, it should install the request module for you. However, I know a lot of you are going to have an issue with this command. If you do have an issue, try the following command, pip3 install request. If that command doesn't work, try python -m pip install request. If that doesn't work, try python 3-m pip install request. And if none of those work, I'll leave 2 videos on the screen showing you how to fix this command. Just follow along with those videos and they will go through. Okay. So at this point in time, I'm going to assume that you have successfully installed the request module. And if you have, then you can go to your Python file and you can import requests. Now, a request is essentially what it says. It's a request for some type of data, a request to do something, and we're going to be hitting what's known as an endpoint, essentially a URL on some remote server, so on the internet, that's going to give us some data or update some database. In this case, we're just going to be getting some data. We're going to be getting the weather data. So the first thing that we need to know to be able to send a request is where we are sending the request to. So we're going to say the base URL is equal to, and then I'm going to copy this in. Again, this code will be available in the description, but I'm sure you could probably just write it out. This is going to be http://api.openweathermap.org/data/2.5/weather. Okay, this is the endpoint, the URL that we want to hit, and we're going to send what's known as some query parameters. These are things that we send alongside this base URL, telling it what data we want. So essentially what city we want to get the weather data from. So once we have our API key and we have our base URL, we now need to get the city for our weather data. So I'm going to ask the user to enter that. So I'm going to say city is equal to input. I'm going to say enter a city name. Okay. Now, not every city is going to work, but I think there's over 200,000 cities that are stored in this API database. And you can read the documentation if you want to look at the specific cities, but most big ones that you would know hopefully should work here. Okay, so once we have the city, what I need to do is actually build kind of a URL that looks similar to this, that includes the city and my API key in it to be able to send the request. So what I'm going to do is say that my request underscore URL is equal to, I'm going to use an F string. Now, an F string allows you to directly embed variables and expressions inside of a string. This is only available in Python version 3.6 and above. but I can do something like place curly braces and then type base URL. Now, when I do this, it's going to paste the value of base URL directly inside of this string and then allow me to add other string characters like an equal sign here, which is quite nice. So I'm going to say base URL, question mark. I'm then going to say app underscore ID. No, it's going to be app with no space ID. I got to look at my cheat sheet here. This is going to be equal to my API key. Okay. And then I'm going to put an and sign and then a Q is equal to, and then this is going to be inside of curly braces, my city. Now let me just close this here. So the way this works is we have our base URL. We then are passing along our API key as what's known as a query parameter. That's anything that comes after the question mark. And then I'm putting an ampersand because I'm going to pass another query parameter, which is Q. Funny enough, Q stands for query. And for the query, I put a city. And that means I'm going to look for the data associated with the city that the user types in. Hopefully that makes sense, but this is the URL that we want to hit. Now we actually need to send a request to this URL. Now, whenever we send a request, there's different types of requests. We have a put request, a post request, a delete request. These are all forms of HTTP requests. So basically, the standard internet requests. We want to send a GET request because we're retrieving data. So what we're going to do is say that data, or actually we'll say the response is equal to request.get. And then we're just going to call the request URL. Okay, so what this is going to do is use the request module, the one that we installed, to send a GET request to this URL. It's going to then give us a response, and the response is going to contain some data. That data is going to be the information associated with our city. However, this response may have an error. There's a potential that maybe there was an issue with our URL, maybe our API keys expired or something along those lines. So we want to check to make sure this response was successful before we try to get the data or the payload that was kind of returned to us. So what I'm going to do is check the status code of this response. Now, a status code of 200 means that this response was successful. You may be familiar with the status code of, say, 404. I believe that's not found, right? Maybe 400, that stands for bad request. There's a ton of different status codes out there, but 200 means okay or successful. So we're going to check to make sure it was successful. Now, if it wasn't successful, then I'm going to print an error occurred, okay? And inside of here, when we are successful, what I want to do is get the data associated with this response. Now, remember, we looked at JSON in the previous project. Well, the data is going to be returned to us as JSON conveniently. So I'm going to say that my data is equal to response.json. So this is something you can use on the response object. This will give you the JSON data as a Python dictionary. And for now, we can just print this out and see if this works. Okay, so we went through a lot there. Let's run the code and see if this is going to work. So we're going to run, enter a city name. I'm going to go with New York. Okay, and then notice it gives me a bunch of data associated with New York. Now let's see if I can make this a bit larger. Okay, that's better. And we can see here that we have the weather, we have main, we have all of these keys. It's kind of hard to read, but we have coordinates associated with this Python dictionary, weather associated with a list. Now this list contains a bunch of different data. I'm trying to figure out where it ends. Okay, it ends right here. We have base, we have main. Main is associated with the temperature, the feels like. So we need to kind of look at this response here and figure out how we want to access the different elements from it. Now, I want to get the weather. So I want the description where it says overcast, for example. And I also want the temperature. Now, the way I get the weather is I access the weather key. And then I access the first element in this list, which is just this right here, right? Because we have a list. Then if I want the temperature, I need to access main, and I need to access the key temperature. So let's go ahead and do that. So the first thing I'll get is the weather. So say the weather is equal to data at weather. Okay, so now we can print out weather like that. And then I will say that the temperature is, am I spelling this correctly, is equal to data at, and then remember this was the main key, and then the next key we wanted after that was temp. And then I can print out the temperature like that. Okay, so let's try this now and see if what we're getting. So when I run this, I'm going to type in, let's just go with New York again, and we get a list. So I need to access the first element in here, and then I get the temperature in Kelvin. And if I want to convert that to Celsius, I need to subtract 273.15 I believe that's the conversion. I'll do that in a second. Anyways, now we would need to get the correct thing for temperature. So I accessed the temperature key, but it gave me a list. So I now want to access the first element in the list, and then I want to access the description. So let's do that. So I'm going to access element, this is for weather, my bad. I want to access 0, and then I want to access the description. Okay, so let's paste that like that. And then for the temperature, I'm just going to subtract 273.15. I may be incorrect, but I believe that's the conversion to Celsius. Okay, so let's run this one more time. Now, when I type in my city, let's go with New York, and I get the description of broken clouds, and then I get kind of some very long number here, right? 2.68. So what I'm going to do now is just round this. I'm also going to write Celsius. We'll do a bit of formatting to make this look nicer, and then that'll pretty much wrap up this project. So now that we have the temperature, let's round this to the nearest 2 decimal places. Okay, so just to get rid of all those extra decimals that we had. And then for the weather, that's fine for now. However, I do want to print out kind of like weather is this, right? Rather than just printing out what it is. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say print. I'm going to say the weather and then comma, and I'll print out the weather. And then I'm going to print, and I'll say the temperature, and then this is going to be equal to the temperature and Celsius like that, okay? Just so we know the unit. Great, so let's run this now. It's going to ask us for a city name. Let's just go with Boston. I know that, actually, is that going to work? Let's see if that's going to work. Okay, it does work. We get overcast clouds, and then we get 1.14 Celsius. Nice. There we go. Okay, so that is this project. We could run this a few more times and see if this works for some other cities. Let's go with Tokyo. Okay, we have few clouds, 5.27 degrees Celsius. You guys can mess around with this, but I think this will work for most of the major cities that you guys would know. This is all of the code. That is how you work with an API. That is this project. There's some more data that you can access. I'll let you guys look at that. You can just print out the data variable here, and then you'll see all of the different keys. Hope this was helpful. Let's go on to project number 3. All right, so now we're moving on to the third and final project, which is sending an email in Python. Now, this is really just a lot of syntax using the built-in Python libraries to send an email. Of course, I will explain it all to you. I do want to mention, though, that I'm showing you the most basic usage of this. So sending an HTML or plain text email, if you want to attach files, if you want to send to multiple people, if you want to do, all the kind of advanced email stuff you may want to do, you're going to have to look up some other documentation or maybe find another tutorial online. This is really just meant to show you the basics and kind of get you introduced to sending emails with Python. It would take me a very long time to go through all of the different possibilities when it comes to sending emails. Now, I'm going to show you specifically how to send an email from a Gmail account. So make kind of a dummy Gmail account if you want. You can use your own account. That's fine. However, you do need to modify one setting when you make the Gmail account. I'm just going to get to that page right now, and I'll show you what it is. So I'm in my Google account. This is kind of a dummy email that I use for YouTube videos, live streams, that type of stuff. Now, what you want to do here is click on Manage Your Google Account. That's how I've gotten to this page. And then go to Security. And you should see something that says Less Secure App Access. Now, you need to check this to on. If you don't have this on, then it's not going to allow Python to actually send an email. So again, you want to go to your Google account settings or manage your Google account, however you get there. You want to click on security and you want to make sure this is on. If it's not on, you're not going to be able to send an email. Okay, nice. Now, I have my inbox open here just so we can see the different emails. Obviously, you can see I was messing around previously, sending some emails from Python. Okay, so let's close that. Let's go here. Now let's start writing some code and send an email with Python. So to do this, we need to import a few Python modules. Now I just want to note that I'm going to be looking at my cheat sheet over here because I can't memorize all of this. So if you see me looking in this direction, that's what I'm doing, just looking at some other code so I can copy it in. So the first thing that we want to import here is the SMTP lib. We also want to import SSL for the secure socket layer. And then we are going to say from email.message import, and this is going to be email message like so. Now, all of these are built into Python, so you don't need to install them. So they should just work. Again, though, make sure you're using Python version 3.6 and above. If you're not, then this import here will probably give you some errors. Okay, so let's start coding out some of the things that we know we're going to need for an email. So a subject, a recipient, a sender, a body, and then I guess we're gonna need the password for the user who wants to send the email. So let's go with subject is equal to, and let's say email from Python. Of course, make this whatever you want. Let's go with the body of the email equal to, this is a test email from Python. Okay, exclamation point. Let's go with the sender underscore email. This is going to be equal to whatever email address that you have. So in my case, it is code racer live stream app@gmail.com. Now I'm just going to send this email to myself, but it will work to send it to anyone else that you want. They don't have to have the secure app. You can send the email to anyone. It's just that if you want to send from an email, you need to have the secure app or less secure apps on. I think that makes sense. Okay, let's say receiver. Did I spell this incorrectly? It looks like I did. Okay, receiver email will be the same email. And then is there anything else that we need? Yes, we need a password. So for the password, I'm just going to say input and then enter a password like this. Now you can put the password in plain text here in the code if you want. Not necessarily the best practice to do that, but the reason why I'm doing a little input field is because I'm just going to cut out the part of the video when I enter the password so that you guys do not actually see what my password is for this email. Okay, so there we go. We have subject, body, sender email, receiver email, and password. Now what we actually need to do is build the email, and the way we're going to build that is by using the email message. Then I'll show you how to send the email. So I'm going to say that my message is equal to an email message. I need to instantiate this class right here. Now that we do that, we need to kind of enter a few fields. So I'm going to say message, and then from. Notice this is kind of in a dictionary format, is going to be equal to, and then this is going to be the sender email. We're going to say message to, and this is going to be equal to the receiver email. And then we're going to say message, and this is going to be the subject, I believe, is going to be equal to the subject. Okay, there we go. Now, when we want to actually set content for the email, so the body of the email, essentially, what we do is the following. We say message dot set underscore content, and then we pass in here the body. Okay, so I'm going to do body. Now I'm going to show you how to send HTML emails in a second so you can format them nicely and have bolding and styling and whatever. But for now, we're just going to send plain text, and then we'll get to HTML. Okay, so we've actually done most of the work here. Next, we need to say context is equal to SSL dot, and then this is going to be create underscore default context. So the reason why I'm doing this is because when we connect to Gmail, we need a secure connection. So I can't really explain this much more in depth, but what this is going to do is give us a context for a secure connection that we can use when we're actually using the SMTP library and connecting to the Gmail server. Because we don't have our own mail server here, we're connecting just to the default Gmail one. And again, we need SSL to do that. Hopefully that makes a tiny bit of sense. You don't really have to understand all of this. You can still send an email if you don't know what one or two of the lines of code does. Okay, continuing here, I'm going to say with SMTP lib dot, and this is going to be in all capitals, SMTP, and then underscore SSL. So we're connecting with the secure socket layer. What I'm going to do is put in the server that I want to connect to, which is smtp.gmail.com. Now, the port for connection, which is the argument here, is going to be 465. And then the context is going to be equal to the context that we just defined. And we're going to say this is as the server. Okay, so all we're doing right now is connecting to, what the heck, did I do something wrong here? Sorry, let me just fix the spelling. SMTP lib, there we go. All we're doing here to continue is just connecting to the Gmail server. And again, we need to do this in a secure way. That's why we're using SSL. Okay, so now that we've connected, what we're going to do is use the server to log into our email account so then we can send an email. So we're going to say server.login. Yeah, I think login is what we need. And we're going to do the sender underscore email and then the password that the user typed in. Okay, so now that we are logged into the server, we actually can read emails. I'm not going to show you how to do that, but that is possible. We also can send emails. Now, to send emails is pretty easy. We're going to say send mail like that. And we're going to do the sender email. We're going to have the receiver underscore email. And then we're going to have message. And we're going to do as underscore string. So the reason why we need to do as string here is because we need to convert the message object that we were kind of building up here into a string so that we can then send this as a string email. Now, again, I'll show you how to do HTML in 1 second, but for now, write all of this out. I'm sure some of this doesn't quite make sense, but this is kind of the best explanation I can give you without going too in depth on how to send an email with Python. Now, we can test this out, but I just want to do a little bit of output here. So I'm going to print, say, sending email, and then I'm going to print after here, success, okay? Just so that we know when this is finished, because it could take a second or two to actually send the email. So let's just space this out a bit. And now let's run this code. I will type in my password and blur that, and then we will see if this works. So I'm going to enter my password. It's going to blur out. So hopefully you guys cannot see this. Editors, please make sure you blur this. Going to hit enter, sending email, success. Okay, now the only way to actually test if this works is to go to the email inbox. So I'm going to go here and refresh. Notice I just got an email. It says email from Python. That's the subject. And then this is a test email from Python. Awesome. We successfully sent an email from Python. Very good. Now we want to do HTML. So to do HTML is actually fairly straightforward. Let me just have a look here and see exactly how I did this before. All right, so to do HTML, we are going to first create the HTML that we want to send. Now, because I'm lazy, I'm just going to copy this in. So this is my HTML. Notice that I'm just having an h1 tag, which is equal to the subject, and then I have a p tag, which is equal to the body. Those are the two variables up here. I'm using a multi-line f string, again, only available in Python 3.6. And what I want to do now is rather than setting the content here, I'm going to say message dot, and this is going to be add underscore alternative, and I'm going to pass HTML, and I'm going to say subtype is equal to HTML. Now, this is adding an alternative thing rather than just like plain text content. We're adding HTML content. So now, hopefully, we should actually be sending email with HTML. Okay, now, of course, I need to define the subtype as HTML, stating that this is going to be HTML because I can add other types of things like files, for example, binary, whatever, to the email. Okay, so I'm going to save this now, and let's run the code. Let me type in my password. Again, editors, make sure you blur this. Okay, sending email, success. So let's now go to our inbox. And that's not my inbox. This is my inbox. Let's see if this works. Okay, refresh. When I come in here, notice we get our beautifully formatted HTML. We have our h1 tag and we have our p tag. And of course, if you know HTML, you can make this look a lot nicer. But that was all I wanted to show you for sending an HTML email. Okay, so this is the finished code here. I'll kind of scroll through it slowly so you guys can have a look. Again, all of this will be available in the description. And with that said, I am going to end the video here. Now, I do want to remind you that I do have a course called programmingexpert.io. It goes over a lot of the Python syntax that you would have seen here. If you were confused at all about this syntax, you just want to learn more about Python, get into more advanced programming, definitely check that course out. You can use the discount code TIM. Go to programmingexpert.io/TIM. With that said, I will end the video here. Again, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you want to see more videos like this, please leave a comment down below. Subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you in another one.